The new CEO fired me at 9:12 on a Monday morning. By 11:06, our biggest client had frozen an $84 million contract and asked why the only person they trusted had just been escorted out carrying a dying pothose in a cardboard box too small for it. Grant Holloway had been CEO of North Star Meridian for 19 days. Apparently, 19 days was enough time to understand a company I had spent almost 8 years helping build. "Your position no longer aligns with our streamlined operating model," he told me. Grant sat at the head of the conference table, wearing the solemn expression of a man announcing budget cuts, while privately enjoying the word streamlined. Vanessa Cole, his chief of staff, sat beside him with my project folder open in front of her. My project folder. She had highlighted 3 pages. All 3 were the table of contents. "So who will lead the Alder Ridge integration?" I asked. "Vanessa will oversee the strategic relationship." Vanessa gave me a sympathetic smile. It was the kind of smile people practiced before poisoning a village well. "She has never managed a healthcare deployment," I said. Grant leaned back. "No individual should be indispensable, Claire." That wasn't my question. The human resources representative stared intensely at her legal pad, perhaps hoping it would open and swallow her. Grant slid a separation agreement toward me. I did not touch it. 3 days earlier, I had warned him that the Alder Ridge system had failed 2 security tests. Grant wanted to launch anyway so he could recognize the revenue before the board's quarterly meeting. I had used the phrase, patient data exposure. He had used the phrase, negative energy. Now I understood which one carried more weight. Security walked me to my desk. My coworkers suddenly became fascinated by their monitors. People I had defended, trained and covered for avoided my eyes. That hurt more than Grant's speech. Someone from HR handed me a box apparently designed for 1 stapler and a modest amount of shame. I balanced my plant, coffee mug and framed photograph against my chest. The elevator doors closed. My phone buzzed. It was Margaret Whitmore, General Counsel for Alder Ridge Health. "Grant just informed us you are no longer assigned to our project. Is there something he neglected to disclose?" I stared at the message, then typed carefully. "I'm no longer employed by North Star. I remain bound by confidentiality and cannot discuss internal matters." Before I could put my phone away, another email appeared. Alder Ridge Health was suspending all implementation activity effective immediately. Then a 3rd message arrived, from North Star's legal department. It accused me of interfering with the client relationship. I had been unemployed for less than 2 hours. And somehow Grant had already decided I was powerful enough to destroy his company from an elevator. He had no idea how much worse his morning was about to become. For the next 4 mornings, I woke at 5:45 without an alarm. My body still believed I had a job. On Tuesday, I made 2 cups of coffee before remembering I lived alone. On Wednesday, I opened my laptop and stared at the North Star login screen until it politely informed me my credentials were invalid. On Thursday, I put on work shoes before realizing my only scheduled appointment was with the washing machine. Unemployment was surprisingly administrative. There were forms, insurance calls, and repeated opportunities to explain that no, I had not voluntarily abandoned a salary and health coverage for spiritual growth. Meanwhile, Vanessa led her first call with Alder Ridge. I knew this because Margaret called afterward. "I will not ask you to disclose confidential information," she said. "I only need to know whether you resigned." I did not. "Were you removed from the project voluntarily?" That question contains a very creative definition of voluntarily. Margaret was silent for a moment. "Understood." She then asked whether I was willing to speak with Alder Ridge's outside counsel. I declined until my own lawyer could review the request. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to describe the failed tests, Grant's deadline, and Vanessa's breathtaking ability to confuse a server with a waiter. Instead, I said nothing. That decision probably saved me. Later that afternoon, Alder Ridge sent North Star a formal notice citing Section 14.3 of the contract. The clause required written client approval before North Star replaced any designated key personnel. My name was in the attached schedule. I had forgotten about it. 3 years earlier, after a disastrous leadership transition, Margaret had insisted that I be listed as the primary integration officer. North Star's former CEO had agreed because nobody imagined a future CEO would fire me days before launch. Optimism is often just poor risk management, wearing comfortable shoes. Grant told the board I had secretly encouraged Alderidge to invoke the clause. He claimed my refusal to speak with the company proved I was hostile. Apparently, being fired had not relieved me of my duty to answer his calls. At 6:20 that evening, a courier delivered a legal letter demanding that I stop interfering with North Star's business relationships. I called Diane Foster, an employment attorney recommended by a former client. She read the letter while I sat at my kitchen counter tearing the corner off a paper napkin for no reason. "This is 12 pages, she said. "Yes." "They have provided no evidence." I noticed. "Good, that means they spent a great deal of money formatting a tantrum." For the first time all week, I laughed. Then Diane reached the final paragraph. Grant was not merely threatening to sue me, he was demanding that I return the following Monday and train Vanessa. Without reinstatement, severance, or any admission that firing me had been a mistake. Grant called me personally on Friday morning. "I'd like us to put emotion aside," he began. A promising opening from the man who had accused me of corporate sabotage because his client read its own contract. "We need a 2-week transition period," he continued. "You'll come in, brief Vanessa, and help stabilize the relationship." Am I being reinstated? No. Will the termination notice be withdrawn? That would create unnecessary complexity. Will you pay a consulting rate? We're prepared to continue your previous salary on a prorated basis. I looked at Diane, who was sitting across from me in her office. She slowly shook her head. Grant kept talking. "You should consider the reputational consequences of being perceived as uncooperative." "I'm sure Vanessa can handle it," I said. "You selected her because no individual should be indispensable." There was a long silence. Grant did not enjoy hearing his own words unless they were being applauded. Before he could answer, Diane ended the call and sent North Star a written response. 2 hours later, Margaret changed the situation entirely. Alderidge did not want me temporarily reinstated. They wanted me appointed as an independent project risk consultant, reporting to a joint oversight committee. North Star could not direct, dismiss, or replace me without client approval. Grant resisted until Alderidge's procurement department reminded him that continued noncompliance allowed them to terminate the contract without penalty. By Sunday night, North Star accepted. I agreed under 3 conditions. All project decisions had to be documented. I would have direct access to the oversight committee, and Vanessa would have no authority to alter my findings. My new hourly rate was almost 3 times my former salary. Diane suggested 4 times. I settled for 3 because I still had the unfortunate character flaw of caring whether hundreds of innocent people kept their jobs. When I returned Monday morning, the security guard looked embarrassed. "Welcome back," he said. "I'm not back." He studied my temporary badge. Consultant? Apparently I became more valuable after losing dental insurance. Upstairs, Vanessa was sitting in my old chair. She had moved my reference manuals into a storage cabinet and placed a white orchid on the desk. It was already wilting. Margaret's team had arranged nameplates around the conference table. Grant's was at one end. Mine was directly opposite his. Vanessa's was 3 seats away. Grant entered, shook Margaret's hand and smiled at me as though we were old friends who had recently disagreed over brunch. When the clients arrived, every technical question came to me. Every operational question came to me. Every risk question came to me. Grant spoke twice. Both times, Margaret asked me to verify what he had said. Afterward, he cornered me near the glass wall overlooking the Chicago River. "Do not confuse this arrangement with authority," he whispered. I looked down at the contract folder in my hand. "I won't," I said. "The contract already defines the authority quite clearly." Behind him, Vanessa had opened the security readiness report. Her face changed when she reached the final page. Someone had marked the failed tests as passed. The altered report had no signature, only a revised status line and a timestamp from the previous Friday. I asked Vanessa who had changed it. She smiled. "We're trying to avoid getting trapped in old definitions. Of passed and failed, of readiness." I wrote her answer in my notes. Her smile disappeared. Over the next 2 weeks, she turned obstruction into a management philosophy. Meetings appeared on my calendar at 6:30 in the morning. Documents arrived 5 minutes before review sessions. Technical staff were instructed to route all questions through her office, where useful information went to experience a quiet death. I responded with email. Not angry email, not dramatic email. The worst kind. Clear email. Following our conversation, I am confirming that the encryption test remains incomplete. Following your instruction, I am noting that the deployment date has not been approved. Following your refusal to provide the audit log, I am documenting the delay. Vanessa complained that I was creating an adversarial paper trail. I thought it was a collaborative paper trail, I said. The font is very friendly. Grant tried a different approach. He invited me to lunch at a hotel restaurant off Michigan Avenue and spoke about rebuilding trust. He ordered for both of us without asking what I wanted, which was an efficient demonstration of his leadership style. "You're making Vanessa nervous," he said. "Cybersecurity makes many people nervous." "This isn't about cybersecurity." "That sentence makes me nervous." Grant placed his fork down. He wanted my verbal assurance that Alder Ridge could begin limited deployment while the remaining tests were completed. I refused. The following morning, Northstar's board received a presentation stating that the client had approved the revised launch schedule. Grant's slides described all security issues as resolved or non-material. I asked Noah Ramirez from compliance whether he had reviewed the language. He glanced toward Vanessa's office before answering. "Not that version." Noah was 29 and permanently looked as though he had just remembered an important deadline. I had once stopped Grant from blaming him for a vendor's coding error. Since then, Noah trusted me enough to tell the truth, though not always loudly. He lowered his voice. "Vanessa asked me to change the date on 2 validation records." "Did you?" "No. Keep copies of your refusal." He swallowed. "Wouldn't that look disloyal?" "Only to someone who requires loyalty to include falsifying dates." That afternoon, I received the final approval packet supposedly signed by Margaret. The signature looked genuine. The approval did not. I called Margaret through the official project channel and asked whether she had authorized deployment. There was a pause. Then she said, very carefully, "Claire, I have never seen that document." At the bottom of the page was a valid electronic signature certificate issued from Margaret's account. Someone had not merely changed a report. Someone had forged the client's approval. Margaret did not react the way people do in movies. She did not shout, threaten anyone, or slam a perfectly good phone onto a desk. She asked for the document identifier, notified outside counsel, and told me not to discuss the matter beyond our legal teams. That was more frightening. Quiet lawyers usually mean someone else will soon become very loud. Diane instructed me to preserve only materials I had legally received through the Oversight Committee. I was not to copy internal files, search Northstar systems, or ask employees to send me confidential records. Grant, meanwhile, began explaining my motives to anyone willing to listen. According to him, I was delaying launch to extend my consulting contract. He told managers that Alder Ridge had become emotionally dependent on me. He even suggested I had manufactured the crisis to embarrass Vanessa. One of my former trainees, Emily, sent me a message. "People are saying you could approve this if you wanted. Why are you doing this to everyone?" I wrote 3 angry paragraphs. Then I deleted them. I typed, "I hope you never have to understand why I cannot sign my name to something unsafe." I deleted that too. Finally, I sent, "I'm following the documented test results. Please protect yourself and keep your work records accurate." She did not reply. That hurt more than it should have. The next day, Vanessa invited me to what she called an informal alignment conversation. There was no agenda, no legal representative, and no one else in the room. Her phone sat face down between us. "Off the record," she said, "would you agree the system is functionally safe?" "No. I'm asking for your professional judgment." "My professional judgment is in the written report." She leaned forward. "Sometimes leadership requires flexibility." I noticed a tiny red light reflecting from the polished edge of her water glass. Her phone was recording. I folded my hands. "Would it help if I listed the unresolved vulnerabilities slowly so your recording captures the technical terms?" Vanessa grabbed the phone. "I wasn't recording." "Then that red light has an unusually strong work ethic." The meeting ended. That evening, Noah found me in the lobby. He did not stop walking. "Check the courier envelope at your hotel." he murmured. I wanted to tell him not to send me anything. Before I could, he stepped into a waiting cab. The envelope contained no confidential client data. It held printed system metadata and a copy of Northstar's whistleblower policy. The forged approval file had been created at 2:13 a.m. from Vanessa's administrator account, but the access log showed a second user had authenticated the session remotely. Grant Holloway. At the bottom of the last page, Noah had written one sentence by hand. They know I found it. I called Noah 3 times. He did not answer. Diane stopped me from driving to his apartment, which was sensible because I did not know his address and had apparently planned to locate him through determination. The next morning, he arrived at work as usual. At 9:30, security escorted him out. Northstar announced that Noah had been terminated for persistent cultural misalignment. Corporate language has a special talent for making retaliation sound like an unsuccessful yoga pose. He carried no box. Grant's people had not allowed him to return to his desk. Before leaving, Noah submitted the access logs through Northstar's formal whistleblower portal. Copies went automatically to the audit committee and outside counsel. He had followed the policy exactly. That mattered, because Grant's next move was to offer me money. A lot of money. Northstar would pay my mortgage, cover 2 years of health insurance, and provide a neutral employment reference. In return, I had to end my consulting role, release all legal claims, and sign a statement confirming that the project reports were accurate to the best of my knowledge. I sat in Diane's office holding the pen. For nearly 8 years, Northstar had taken my weekends, canceled vacations, and trained me to treat exhaustion like loyalty. The settlement would let me walk away. I wanted to walk away. I hated myself slightly for wanting it. Diane said nothing. She knew silence was more useful than a speech. I read the sentence again, accurate to the best of my knowledge. It was not a release. It was an alibi. I put the pen down. No, Grant called within 10 minutes. You are risking hundreds of jobs over technical semantics. Forging client approval isn't semantics. His breathing changed. That was the first confirmation I received that he knew. He told me the board would vote within days on the sale of Northstar. The company's valuation depended on recognizing the Alder Ridge revenue. If the launch was delayed, the deal could collapse. There it was. He had not falsified the approval because he misunderstood the project. He had done it because the truth was inconvenient to his payout. That afternoon, the audit committee announced an emergency investigation and ordered all relevant communications preserved. Grant remained calm. He had been appointed by the board chair, Leonard Shaw, who had championed the sale from the beginning. As we entered the emergency meeting 2 days later, Grant smiled at me. Leonard sat at the head of the table. Vanessa sat beside Grant. Noah's chair was empty. Grant opened a presentation titled, Coordinated Disruption of a Strategic Transaction. My photograph appeared on the second slide. Apparently, I was no longer a former employee. I was a conspiracy. Grant spent 20 minutes explaining me to people who had never once asked me a question. I was resentful. I was financially motivated. I had manipulated Margaret, recruited Noah, and created artificial security concerns to regain influence. His presentation contained arrows, timelines, and one stock photograph of interlocking gears. Nothing says innocence like licensed imagery. When he finished, Leonard turned to me. Miss Bennett, do you deny coordinating with Mr. Ramirez? I advised him to preserve records and follow company policy, so you influenced him. I also once advised him not to microwave fish in the break room. I don't believe that makes me responsible for lunch. 2 directors looked down to hide smiles. I did not give a speech. I gave dates, the failed penetration test, Vanessa's request to alter validation records, Grant's investor presentation, the false approval packet. Margaret joined by video and confirmed under advice of counsel that she had never authorized the signature or deployment. For the first time, Leonard stopped looking at me and looked at Grant. Grant said the document had been prepared by Vanessa without his knowledge. Vanessa's face went white. Then something unexpected happened. She opened her laptop and handed it to the audit committee's lawyer. I acted under direct instruction, she said. Grant turned toward her slowly. Vanessa had saved their messages. Make it look approved. Use the prior certificate. We only need it clean through the board vote. She had also recorded a late-night call in which Grant promised her Claire's former title and a substantial bonus after the sale. Vanessa had not grown a conscience. She had calculated that Grant's ship was sinking and climbed onto the nearest floating lawyer. Grant recovered quickly. He argued that the evidence was contaminated because Noah had improperly disclosed internal records to me. He demanded the committee remove me, disregard the documents, and refer both of us for prosecution. For half a second, the room shifted. Then Diane placed Northstar's whistleblower policy on the table. Noah had not given me the underlying data. He had submitted the evidence directly to the audit committee through a protected channel. The pages delivered to me contained only metadata necessary for my contractually required risk review. The committee's outside counsel confirmed that Noah's submission was authorized. Grant's final defense collapsed with remarkably little ceremony. Leonard ordered Grant and Vanessa to surrender their company phones and computers. Grant stood. "You appointed me to complete this sale," he told Leonard. "You knew what the deadline required." Every person in the room became still. Leonard's expression changed. The investigation had just grown another branch. As security led Grant away, his phone vibrated on the table. The preview showed an unread message from a federal investigator requesting immediate contact. Grant was suspended that afternoon. By evening, an article described him as a visionary CEO targeted by entrenched internal interests. By morning, strangers online had decided I was jealous, unstable, and probably difficult at dinner. A crisis consultant representing Grant called me a disgruntled middle manager. I had been a director. There is something uniquely insulting about being defamed inaccurately. Diane told me not to respond publicly. Margaret's lawyers said the same. So I watched Grant's version of events spread while I stayed silent. For 3 nights I barely slept. I began wondering whether I should have taken the settlement. I imagined the employees who might lose jobs if the sale collapsed. I replayed every meeting, searching for the moment when I could have been quieter, warmer, or less correct. Then Alder Ridge made its decision. They would not terminate the contract. They would postpone deployment for 12 weeks and require a complete remediation program under my supervision. That meant returning to Northstar every day. Some employees apologized. Some avoided me. A few behaved as though they had supported me all along, which was impressive, because I remembered watching them examine their keyboards while security removed me. Emily approached me near the coffee station. "I'm sorry about my message," she said. "I wanted to say it was fine. It was not fine." "I understand why you were afraid," I told her. "But fear doesn't make silence harmless." She nodded and began crying. I handed her a napkin, then accidentally pulled 20 more from the dispenser. We stood surrounded by paper napkins like the world's least festive wedding. Noah returned as a protected witness for the audit committee. He looked exhausted. "I thought I ruined your career," he told me. "You didn't. I waited too long. So did almost everyone." His eyes filled. I told him the vulnerabilities involve systems handling patient records. If he had remained silent, people who would never know our names could have paid the price. The expanded audit uncovered more than the forged approval. Grant and Vanessa had hidden vendor costs, manipulated revenue forecasts, and charged private trips to corporate accounts. One strategy retreat in Napa had contained no employees besides the 2 of them. Apparently, the strategy required 1 hotel suite and matching spa appointments. Investigators also discovered Grant had promised a preferred vendor additional work in exchange for consulting payments, routed to a company owned by his brother-in-law. The federal inquiry became official. An agent asked to meet me and Diane at Margaret's office. He played a recording recovered from Vanessa's phone. Grant's voice was clear. So was Leonard Shaw's. "Once the sale closes," Leonard said, "no one will care how we got the approval." The board chair had not merely ignored the scheme. He had authorized it. The investigation lasted 3 months. Leonard resigned before the board could remove him, an elegant corporate tradition in which a man leaves through the same door but insists it was his idea. Grant, Leonard, and Vanessa were charged with wire fraud, falsifying business records, and conspiracy to mislead investors. Assets connected to the alleged scheme were frozen pending trial. Vanessa reached a cooperation agreement. Grant called me from his attorney's office. I almost did not answer. but curiosity remains one of my less professional weaknesses. You've made your point, he said. I wasn't aware we were debating. People lost bonuses. The sale collapsed. The company's valuation dropped. You forged a client approval. You could have handled this internally. I tried. You fired the compliance officer. He sighed as though I were being deliberately exhausting. You overreacted because you were angry about losing your job. No, Grant. I became angry after discovering the fraud. The sequence matters. He told me I had betrayed Northstar. I told him he still could not distinguish betrayal from being discovered. Then I ended the call. Northstar's interim board offered me the chief operating officer position. The package included equity, authority to rebuild the compliance function, and a public statement clearing my name. A year earlier, I would have accepted before they finished the sentence. I asked for one night. I walked along the river after dark, passing the glass building where I had spent nearly 8 years. I thought about the late nights, the people I had trained, and the version of myself who believed endurance would eventually be rewarded. Northstar had taught employees to remain silent until silence became part of the business model. A better title would not erase that. The next morning, I declined. I agreed to finish the Alder Ridge remediation, but only as an outside consultant. Noah was reinstated with back pay and appointed Deputy Director of Compliance. Emily joined the remediation team and became one of the first people to challenge a senior executive in writing. Margaret took me to lunch after the decision. What will you do next? She asked. I've considered sleeping. Ambitious. Possibly opening a consulting firm after that. She slid a folder across the table. Inside was a proposed 12-month engagement from Alder Ridge. They wanted to become my first client. 2 weeks later, I signed a lease for a small office overlooking the Chicago River. The carpet was ugly, the lighting was worse, and the previous tenant had left behind a filing cabinet that refused to open. I loved it immediately. When the property manager handed me the key, I realized my hand was shaking. For the first time since Grant fired me, I was not trying to recover what I had lost. I was building something he had never been able to give me. 6 months later, Bennett Risk and Integration occupied 4 rooms, employed 7 people, and owned a coffee machine that made noises suggesting unresolved childhood trauma. The Alder Ridge deployment went live after every security test passed. No patient data was exposed. No dramatic sirens sounded. No one applauded when the servers stayed online. Success in my field is often wonderfully boring. Northstar survived the failed sale. The new board replaced senior leadership, strengthened whistleblower protections, and separated revenue decisions from security approval. The company was smaller, but nobody lost a job because of the delayed launch. Noah became director of compliance at 30. His first policy memorandum was 43 pages long. I told him federal law was shorter. He replied that federal law lacked his attention to detail. Emily was promoted and developed the useful habit of asking executives to put questionable instructions in writing. Strangely, many questionable instructions disappeared when exposed to email. Vanessa testified against Grant and Leonard. She avoided the longest possible sentence, but lost her position, professional credentials, and most of the money she had expected from the sale. Leonard pleaded guilty to conspiracy and financial misconduct. Grant held out until prosecutors presented the recordings, access logs, and payment records. He eventually accepted a plea agreement and received a federal prison sentence, restitution obligations, and a prohibition on serving as an officer of a public company. I did not attend the sentencing. For months, I had imagined I would feel victorious when justice arrived. Mostly, I felt tired. Grant had taken years of trust from people who believed they were building something worthwhile. No sentence could return that untouched. One Friday afternoon, I bought a pothos like the one I had carried out of Northstar. I placed it beside the window in my new office. Then I overwatered it. Water spread across the sill and dripped onto a stack of signed contracts. I used half a roll of paper towels while my employees offered increasingly unhelpful advice from the doorway. "Excellent crisis management," Noah said. "I'm testing the drainage controls." The plant survived. So did I. Grant once believed power meant deciding who remained in the room. He thought firing me made me irrelevant and that replacing my name on an organization chart could erase 8 years of trust. He was wrong. Real power was not making frightened people obey. It was creating a place where telling the truth did not require courage every single day. That evening, I turned off the office lights and stood for a moment beside the window. The Chicago River reflected the city in broken lines of gold. I still regretted things. I regretted staying silent during earlier warning signs. I regretted judging coworkers who had mortgages, children, and reasons to be afraid. I regretted giving North Star parts of my life it had never deserved, but regret was no longer the same as blame. I locked the door behind me. For once, I did not look back. 18 months after Grant fired me, I received an invitation to speak at a healthcare compliance conference in Washington, D.C. The proposed session title called me a whistleblower. I asked them to change it. Noah was the whistleblower. Margaret protected the contract. Diane protected the process. I was simply the person who refused to sign a lie after several people made it extremely profitable to do so. They renamed the session "When Silence Becomes a Business Risk." That felt more accurate. Bennett Risk and Integration had grown to 23 employees. We rejected clients who wanted decorative compliance reports and charged extra whenever an executive used the phrase, "move fast," near patient data. I took weekends off now, not every weekend. I was still me. But enough of them. North Star eventually became one of our clients. The first time its new CEO entered my office, he asked whether working together would be uncomfortable. "Probably," I said. "Comfort is not included in the contract." He laughed, then signed it anyway. The old pothouse remained beside my window, healthier than it had any right to be. I kept the undersized cardboard box from the day I was fired folded in a storage closet, not as a trophy, as a measurement. Whenever I wondered whether losing North Star had ruined my life, I looked at that box and remembered how small they had expected my future to be. They had been wrong about that too.